The story, the Bible in more of a novel form, and we've studied it all the way from creation to this point. And as Johanna reminded us this morning, we are not looking at any small little time period. This is hundreds, if not thousands of years of story that we're going to be reviewing. So let's take a look this morning. We're going to look at the Exodus out of Egypt, how Moses led the people away from their time of enslavement in Egypt. Remember, they got there because of the famine, and Joseph was there overseeing all of that. And with that, his family came into Egypt. From there, they just grew. And the larger they got, the more Pharaoh pressed down and kept them oppressed, until finally we get to the breaking point, and Exodus takes place. Let's take a look. And God spoke all these words. I am the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself an image in the form of anything in heaven, above or on the earth beneath, or in the waters below. You shall not bow down to them or worship them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, punishing the children for the sins of the parents to the third and the fourth generation of those who hate me, but showing love to 1,000 generations of those who love me and keep my commandments. You shall not misuse the name of the Lord your God, for the Lord will not hold anyone guiltless who misuses his name. As we said, we're going to look at parts of the Exodus. Obviously, we can't look at all of it. I can plan another whole series on Wednesdays or Thursdays or something for you, and we'll take a look at that. But on this morning, we're only going to be able to look at a small little portion of that, and part of what we're going to look at is what's known as the Ten Commandments, what they're about, how they came to be. And hopefully when you leave this morning, the Ten Commandments will be more than just a list of the things that we cannot do, but will be God's loving relationship with his people. Before that, let's take a look at a summary of our readings for this past week. Did you click? Or not? No? All right. Well, we'll look at that another time. I want to start out with a story. Maybe because yesterday, as I said, we spent all day with Christopher and with his girlfriend Amy and her daughter Jamie. Those of you who were here at Christmas time and around, you know Jamie is a little headstrong. Jamie likes to do what Jamie likes to do and when she likes to do it. Not that that's all that untypical of a 6-year-old, but she has probably a bit more of that than some. And I remember reading in Randy Frazie's book, which is kind of a little introduction to all of our stories, a story he was telling about a 5-year-old. Let me share that with you as we start. He says, I'm reminded of a 5-year-old girl who was having one of those can't stay out of trouble days. Her mother had reprimanded her several times for being disobedient and finally lost her patience with her daughter's willful behavior. I guess that's one way to put it. And she sent the child to a chair for a timeout. The little girl went to the chair and sat down. After a few minutes, she called to her mother, Mommy, I'm sitting down on the outside, but I'm standing up on the inside. See, you can relate with that. I know after yesterday, so can I. It's in our human nature to stand up on the inside and defy authority when other people tell us what we can or cannot do. That pretty adequately describes our human condition, doesn't it? God says, all right, we need to get things straightened out. You're in a timeout for a little bit. I want you to go sit. We're saying, God, I'm sitting down on the outside, but I'm standing up on the inside. Our whole lives are defined that way. As long as we didn't have that, let me give you a little review of where we've been. We want to connect the upper story of what God is doing in his plan of salvation, his grand and sweeping plan for all of us, to some of the things that are happening on that lower story. We've seen creation, we've seen God's love for his people, how we came into existence precisely because God loved us so much. He wanted communion with us. He wanted to dwell with us. And if you remember, it says, dwelt with Adam and Eve, and he walked in the garden with them, and they met him there daily, and they walked and talked with him until they messed it all up. And then we've been looking for a way back, and God has been looking for that way to bring us back. It's that loving relationship that continues to drive that upper story, God's plan for giving us a new life with him. We saw how Noah was one attempt to bring us back. Joseph was definitely one of those stories of God's love and how he cared for his people in spite of all of the things on the lower level that seemed to go contrary to that. You know, Joseph was sold into slavery. He was sent off into another country. He was displaced from his family. All of those things we could have focused on, and yet Joseph chose to focus on God's upper story. Now, chapter 5. Chapter 5 gives us a little bit different picture. It tells us that God's overriding desire is to come down and dwell with us as his people. And he is our God. That's the big story, if you will, that's happening in all of this morning's message, but also all of the messages that are going to follow. God's desire to come and dwell with us here on earth. Read a story a while back, came out of a scientific journal, that researchers in a number of Midwestern universities had been looking at the Genome Project, and within there had they found, they said, a gene that they could pinpoint as what they call the religion gene. Without that, people did not have this burning desire for God. But it happens so rare. And they said, within that, they said, this gene actually gave us this predisposition to search for God. It says we were all looking for a higher power, someone else to give meaning and control within our lives. Now, it surprised me a bit that we had researchers even looking for it. It surprised me as well that they had confirmed that all of that was taking place within our lives. Pascal, the French mathematician and philosopher, quite a few centuries ago, was one of these child prodigies. At 12 years old, he had discovered the principles of geometry, and at 16, he wrote the Geometry of Conics. He invented the calculator.